Tonight's stories are about what mothers leave behind. In the first, a dying woman passes her guardian angel to her son, and it isn't an angel at all. In the second, a grieving daughter moves back home, only to find that the house misses her mother too, and it's learning how to keep her. Two tales of inheritance, devotion, and the horrors that call themselves love. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. Story 1. My dying mother promised her guardian angel would protect me. I've seen it now, and I don't think it's an angel. My mother died 2 months ago. It wasn't a tragedy in the sudden, shocking sense. It was a long, slow, quiet fading cancer. We had years to prepare, but you're never really prepared. The last week was spent in a sterile, beige-colored hospice room that smelled of bleach. And quiet finality. I sat by her bed, holding her thin, papery hand, just watching her breathe. She was at peace with it. That was the strangest, most difficult part. While I was a tangled, screaming knot of grief and anticipatory loss, she was serene. On her last day, when her breathing was shallow and her voice was a dry, rustling whisper, she pulled me close. Her eyes, which had been cloudy and distant, were suddenly crystal clear. "Don't be sad, my love," she whispered, a faint, tired smile on her lips. "I'm not afraid. I've never been afraid. He's always been with me." "Who, Mom?" I asked, my voice thick with tears. "My guardian," she said, her gaze shifting to a point just over my shoulder. "My protector. He was a gift from my own mother when she passed. He's kept me safe my whole life. He's never let any real harm come to me." I didn't know what to say. My mother had always been a little spiritual, in a vague, non-denominational way. I just assumed it was the morphine talking. A final, comforting delusion. I squeezed her hand. "When I go," she continued, her eyes locking back onto mine with a startling intensity, "he will pass to you. He has to. He needs someone to watch over. You will be safe now, always." "Mom, don't talk like that," I choked out. "You won't believe me at first," she said, ignoring me, her voice gaining a strange final strength. "But you'll know. There will be 10 marks, 10 signs after I'm gone. When you've seen the 10th, you'll know he's with you. And then you will see him." She recited the marks to me then, her voice a low, rhythmic chant. A coin returned, a silent bell. A path cleared, a saved fall, a warning unheard, a fear answered, a scent of the old earth, a touch of cold fur, a voice not your own. And finally, a gaze returned. She finished, and a deep, peaceful sigh escaped her lips. She closed her eyes, and a few hours later, she was gone. The funeral was a blur. The weeks that followed were a suffocating fog of grief and paperwork. I was just going through the motions, a ghost in my own life. I'd completely forgotten her strange, final words. They were just the ramblings of a dying woman, a final, beautiful, meaningless piece of poetry. Then the first mark appeared. I was at the grocery store, fumbling for my keys in the parking lot, and a quarter slipped through my fingers, clattering onto the dark, wet asphalt. It was late, raining. I looked for a minute, but it was gone. Probably rolled under the car. I sighed, wrote it off, and drove home. When I got to my apartment and emptied my pockets onto the dresser, there it was, sitting right in the center of the pile of my keys and wallet. A single, dry, gleaming quarter. I stared at it. It was impossible. My pockets had been empty, but my grieving mind immediately supplied a dozen rational explanations. I must have had another one. I must have picked it up without realizing it. I dismissed it, but a tiny, cold seed of unease had been planted. A coin returned. A week later, the second mark. I was walking home from work, taking my usual route past an old, decommissioned church. As I passed its silent, stone bell tower, I heard it. A single, clear, resonant bong of a great bell, echoing through the quiet afternoon air. I looked up. The tower was still. The great bell was motionless. No birds flew out. No one else on the street seemed to have noticed. An auditory hallucination, I told myself. Stress and grief do strange things to your mind. A silent bell. The third mark came a few days after that. My work building is old, and the maintenance staff is constantly doing repairs. I was heading to the break room, but the hallway was blocked by a huge, wheeled cart full of tools and equipment, left there by a worker who was nowhere in sight. I sighed, annoyed, and turned to go the long way around. I got to the end of the hall, turned the corner, then realized I'd forgotten my wallet at my desk. I turned back. The hallway was empty. The massive cart was gone. The whole process had taken less than 30 seconds. There was no way anyone could have moved it that fast. It had just vanished. A path cleared. I wasn't just uneasy anymore. I was starting to get scared. These could not be just coincidences. They were too specific, too perfectly aligned with my mother's strange prophecy. I started to feel like I was a character in a story that someone else was writing, and I started to feel like I was being watched. It was a constant, low-grade, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I'd be in my apartment, and I'd feel a sudden, intense pressure, as if someone had just walked into the room. I'd spin around, my heart pounding, but there was never anyone there. I started seeing things, too. Flickers of movement at the very edge of my vision. A shadow in a doorway that was a little too tall, a little too dark. When I'd turn to look, it would be gone. Mark number 4 happened a week later. I was clumsy with grief, not paying attention. I was walking down the stairs to my apartment's lobby. I missed a step, and I pitched forward. I remember the sickening, weightless lurch, the flash of the hard tile floor rushing up to meet me. I braced for the impact, for the crack of bone, but it never came. I just stopped, a foot from the ground, suspended in midair for a split second, as if an invisible, powerful hand had caught me by the chest. Then I was set down, gently, on my feet. I stood there, trembling, in the empty, silent stairwell. A saved fall. The 5th and 6th marks came in quick succession, like a 1-2 punch from this invisible force that was now ordering my life. I was about to get on an elevator at a shopping mall when I felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of pure dread. A silent, internal scream telling me, "Do not get in." I hesitated and let the doors close without me. A moment later, the lights on the floor indicator went dark, and a loud, grinding screech echoed down the elevator shaft, followed by the distant sound of the alarm bell ringing. A warning unheard. That same evening, I was walking home through the park. A large, barking dog, off its leash, came bounding towards me, its teeth bared. I froze, a jolt of pure, primal fear shooting through me. The dog was a foot away, ready to leap, when it suddenly stopped. It let out a high-pitched, terrified yelp, tucked its tail between its legs, and fled, as if it had seen something standing right behind me. A fear answered. I was 6 marks in, and my life was no longer my own. I was being guided, protected, manipulated by an unseen, unknowable force. The feeling of being watched was a certainty now. I began to see it more clearly, though never directly. In the reflection of my dark TV screen, I'd see a shape standing in the room behind me. It was tall, stooped like an old man, with arms that were too long, their hands almost touching the floor. In the reflection of a shop window as I walked by, I'd see it, a dark, hulking shape, following a few paces behind me, always keeping to the shadows. The 7th and 8th marks brought it closer, from a visual presence to a physical one. I started to notice a strange smell in my apartment, a smell that would come and go without reason. It was a heavy, musky animal scent, the smell of damp, rich earth and something else, something like wet fur, a scent of the old earth. One night, I was lying in bed, the lights on, my nerves a raw, jangled mess. I was drifting in that gray space before sleep when I felt something brush against my outstretched hand. It was a coarse, bristly feeling, like touching a thick, wiry animal pelt. I snatched my hand back with a choked cry, my heart exploding in my chest. I was alone in the room. There was nothing there. A touch of cold fur. I was 9 marks in. The terror was a constant companion now. I knew the 10th mark was coming. And I knew that with it would come the final terrible reveal. I didn't know what I was more afraid of, the waiting or the seeing. The 9th mark came last night. I had finally managed to fall into a fitful, exhausted sleep. I was woken up, but by a voice, a low, guttural, wet sound whispered directly into my ear. It wasn't a language I knew, but I felt the meaning of the sound in my bones. It was a word that meant mine, a voice not your own. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of my living room, clutching a baseball bat, watching the shadows, waiting for the dawn. Tonight, I knew it would end. The final mark. I sat on my couch, the TV off, all the lights in my apartment blazing. The feeling of the presence in the room was overwhelming. It was a physical pressure, a thickness in the air. The musky, animal scent was overpowering. I could feel it, just there, in the dark hallway that led to my bedroom, waiting. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was a year of grief. Maybe it was weeks of mounting terror. But I was done being scared. I was done being the victim in this ghost story. I needed to see it. I needed to face it. Okay, I said, my voice a shaking, defiant whisper to the empty air. I know you're here. Show yourself. The air in the hallway seemed to shimmer, to darken. A shape began to resolve itself out of the gloom. At first, it was the familiar, stooped silhouette of an old man. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, even with its hunched posture. Its arms were long, the gnarled, 3-jointed fingers of its hands brushing against the floorboards. Its body was covered in a thick, matted, greasy black fur. And then it lifted its head. And I saw its face. It wasn't a man's face. It was the long, narrow, bearded head of a goat. Its horns were thick and curved, spiraling back from its narrow skull. But the worst part, the part that finally, completely, broke my mind, was its eyes. They weren't the dumb, placid eyes of a farm animal. They were a pair of intelligent, ancient, and utterly malevolent yellow eyes. The pupils horizontal slits, like a serpent's. And they were looking directly at me. A gaze returned. The 10th mark, the final sign. My mother's guardian angel. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat. A solid, immovable ball of pure terror. We just stared at each other, for an eternity, across the 20 feet of my brightly lit living room, and in its ancient, yellow eyes, I saw it. The same serene, peaceful, knowing look my mother had on her face when she died. It is my protector, my guardian. It has been with me, a silent, unseen shadow, for the past 2 months. It cleared the path for me. It saved me from the fall. It frightened away the dog. And now that I have seen it, it no longer feels the need to hide. I am writing this now from my desk. The sun has come up, but it has brought no comfort, because it's still here. It's standing in the corner of my room. By the door, its stooped, hairy form a black hole in the morning light. It hasn't moved. It just watches. My mother's final words echo in my head. I've never been afraid. He's always been with me. What do I do? How do you escape a guardian angel? How do you run from a protector that will never, ever let any harm come to you, but whose very presence is a fate worse than death? Story 2. My mother used to say that houses are alive. She wasn't wrong. I moved back into my mother's house 2 months ago. It wasn't part of the plan. The plan was to rent somewhere small, get my bearings again after she died, and maybe try to rebuild the pieces of my life that fell apart with her. But when I went to collect her things, I couldn't leave. There was something about the house, something that felt like unfinished business. It's the same old 2-story I grew up in. White siding, creaky porch, the faint smell of dust and lavender. My mother loved that smell. She said it calmed the house down. Even as a kid, though, I never felt calm here. I used to tell her the walls made noises when I was alone. Little groans, sighs, a kind of hum when I cried. She'd laugh and say, "Old houses settle, Clara. They creak because they're alive in their own way." I thought she meant it metaphorically. I don't anymore. The first few nights back were normal enough. Lonely. Yes. Too quiet. I couldn't sleep in my old bedroom. It still had those faint outlines on the wall from where I'd taped up posters like ghosts of teenage years I'd rather forget. So I took my mother's room instead. Her perfume lingered on the curtains, and the bed still dipped on her side, as if she'd only just gotten up. I started cleaning during the day, sorting through her things, trying to make the place feel like mine. That's when it started. Small things, things I told myself were coincidence. One afternoon, I caught myself thinking this dresser would look better by the window. The next morning, it was. I laughed it off, assuming I'd moved it and forgotten. But then it happened again. I was reaching for the hallway light switch, but the switch wasn't there. Instead, it was on the other wall, right where my hand had hesitated a moment before. My stomach dropped, like missing a step on the stairs. I told myself I was misremembering, that grief makes people fuzzy. That night, I walked through the house, taking pictures of the layout, of where everything was, so I could prove to myself it wasn't moving. The next day, the photos didn't match. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. Doors an inch off, stair count one higher, the kitchen windows slightly taller. I thought maybe I was going insane. I even scheduled an appointment with a therapist. But then, the house started helping me. When I'd think about coffee, I'd find the mug already waiting on the counter. When I'd feel cold, the heat would hum to life without me touching the thermostat. One night, I couldn't find my phone, I whispered. Where did I leave it? And the bedroom light flickered like a nod. I found it glowing on the nightstand. It felt like the house cared. It was subtle, intimate, almost maternal. Like it wanted to take care of me the way she used to. I told myself that was comforting. But comfort doesn't last here. The first time I got angry, I felt it breathe. I was trying to open a jammed drawer, my mother's old jewelry box, the one with the music that never worked, and it wouldn't budge. I yanked harder, muttering under my breath. For God's sake, open! Every door in the house slammed at once. The windows rattled. The air pressure changed, like before a storm. And then it was still. I stood there shaking, trying to laugh it off. Old houses, I whispered, but I could feel something watching me, not from a corner or doorway, but from the walls themselves. After that, I started testing it. When I felt sad, the lights dimmed. When I panicked, the hallway stretched. I swear to you, it elongated, the end of it sliding further away as I ran. When I calmed down, it shrank again. I told myself it was grief, stress, trauma, all the buzzwords therapists love to use. But then, I started noticing something worse. The house wasn't reacting to me anymore. It was anticipating. I'd reach for the faucet. It would turn before my fingers touched it. I'd think about checking the mail and hear the front door unlatch on its own. I'd dream about my mother and wake up to find her perfume thick in the air, as if she'd been standing right over me. The final straw was the basement. I've always hated that basement. As a kid, I refused to go down there. My mother kept the door locked most of the time anyway, said it was for storage, though I don't ever remember her storing anything. Last week, I was sitting in the living room when I heard something moving beneath the floorboards. Slow, deliberate, like someone dragging furniture. I froze. Then, I heard a whisper. "Come see what I've made for you." It was my mother's voice. I wanted to run, but the hallway had already shifted. The front door was gone. Only one door remained open. The basement. I don't remember walking down the stairs. I just remember the smell. Wet earth, lavender, and something metallic underneath. The basement was larger than it should have been. The floor sloped downward, the walls bending in impossible curves. The wallpaper from upstairs bled into concrete, as though the house was growing downward. At the center was a new door, one I'd never seen. It was painted white, but wet, like the paint hadn't dried. I touched it, and the door breathed. The wood expanded against my palm, warm and pulsing. I stepped back, trembling. The whisper came again. closer this time. "You've been thinking so loudly, Clara. We only wanted to help." I screamed and ran back up the stairs, but they wouldn't end. The steps kept repeating, looping like an optical illusion. The house was folding in on itself, reconfiguring. Every thought I had became a direction. "Don't close in," the ceiling lowered. "Don't lock me in." The door vanished. "Stop, stop, stop." The walls pulsed harder, almost shuddering. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in bed, morning light filtering through the curtains. Everything normal again, the furniture in its place. For a while, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, until I saw the note on my dresser, my mother's handwriting. "Don't leave again. The house gets lonely." The note was written on wallpaper that matched the basement. "I've tried leaving. I've tried. Every time I pack my bags, something goes wrong. The tires deflate. The front door locks itself. My phone refuses to dial anyone but Mom. And she answers. Sometimes I hear her humming through the vents at night, the same lullaby she sang when I was small. Sometimes I smell that, lavender perfume, and the walls ripple softly, as if pleased. I think the house is keeping me safe. No, I think it's keeping me. Because last night, I dreamt of that white door again. I could hear breathing on the other side, slow, steady, in sync with mine. When I woke up, there was a new door in the hallway. This one red, wet, waiting. I think it wants to make me part of it. Maybe that's what happened to her. Maybe that's why the house always felt alive. If anyone reading this knows anything about old homes, foundations that shift, blueprints that don't stay consistent, please tell me if this is possible. Tell me there's a reason. Because I looked up property records. This house has stood here since 1913. It's been sold 16 times, every owner listed as deceased on property. But there's one detail that makes my skin crawl. Each record lists a different floor plan, and the most recent one, the one dated this year, has a new room added, a bedroom with my name on it. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.